The sharp crack of Major Chamberlain's fist hitting the mahogany briefing table echoed through the Intelligence Operations Center at Fort Liberty like a gavel sentencing the unworthy. 47 officers and senior NCOs turned in unison, conversations dying mid-sentence. The morning briefing hadn't even started, and already the room carried that particular tension of military hierarchy about to be enforced. Jade Worser entered through the side door at precisely 06:45 hours. She moved quietly, contractor lanyards swinging against a loose cardigan that concealed everything worth noticing about her 5'6", 142-pound frame. Dark brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup. Khaki slacks that suggested office work, not operations. In her arms, a laptop, 3 classified folders marked with red cover sheets, and the invisible weight of everything these officers would never see. She took her seat at the back table, the contractor area, separate from the uniformed personnel by 15 feet and an ocean of assumption. Major Derek Chamberlain noticed her immediately. He had that quality common to officers who'd spent entire careers in training commands, never deployed, never tested. At 38 years old, 6'1" with parade ground posture, his blonde hair meticulously groomed, he projected authority he'd never actually earned under fire. His cold blue eyes fixed on Jade with the particular disdain reserved for those he considered beneath him. "Excuse me." His voice cut across the room. "Contractors, sit outside until summoned." Jade looked up, meeting his gaze with unsettling calm. Hazel eyes that held something the major couldn't quite identify, something that should have warned him. "Sir, I'm assigned to present the weekly threat assessment." Her voice was steady, professional, empty of defensiveness. Since when did desk jockeys brief combat officers? Chamberlain's lips curved into something approximating a smile. The room rippled with nervous laughter. Captain Trevor Hayes, 29 years old, with red hair and desperate green eyes, laughed loudest. "Maybe she's here to fix the coffee machine." He was 5'11", lean, the kind of officer who attached himself to stronger personalities because he had none of his own. Lieutenant Vanessa Pruitt, 26, athletic build hidden under her pressed uniform, leaned toward the captain beside her. "I'm all for women in the military, but contractors dilute real service." She said it loud enough to carry, loud enough to establish her position in the hierarchy by pushing another woman down. Phones came out, subtly at first, then openly. 40-plus devices angling for the perfect shot of whatever was about to happen. Command Sergeant Major Frank Morrison sat in the front row, his weathered face impassive. 51 years old, 6 feet of experience earned through 28 years that included multiple deployments and a Ranger tab he'd earned the hard way. His brown eyes tracked Jade's movements as she calmly opened her laptop. The way her weight distributed when she stood, the economy of motion, the slight calluses visible on her hands when she reached for the folders. Those weren't office hands. Specialist Nina Kowalski, 22 and idealistic, sat 3 rows back. She noticed the small scar on Jade's neck, partially hidden by her collar. Puckered tissue, consistent with shrapnel wounds. But Kowalski said nothing, uncertain in a room full of senior personnel. "I'm ready when you are, sir." Jade's voice remained level. She stood at a position that wasn't quite parade rest, but wasn't civilian casual either. Something in between that suggested muscle memory fighting against intentional concealment. Chamberlain made a show of checking his watch. "Actually, I need to finish some important business first. You can wait." 15 minutes crawled past. Officers filled the time with whispered commentary that wasn't whispered enough. What's her MOS? Microsoft Office specialist? This from Captain Hayes, proud of his own joke. Probably couldn't even pass basic training. An infantry lieutenant Jade didn't recognize. "My kid could do her job." This from a major in the second row. Through it all, Jade remained standing. Perfect posture that should have told them something. eyes that tracked the room's two exits with the kind of automatic threat assessment that wasn't taught in contractor orientation. CSM Morrison leaned toward the sergeant first class beside him. Notice her stance, sir. Weight on the balls of her feet, knees slightly bent. That's not how civilians stand. That's how fighters stand. Morrison's voice was barely audible, a warning no one else heard. At 0700 hours exactly, Chamberlain finally nodded. All right, desk jockey, educate us. Jade connected her laptop to the briefing system. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, entering her classified credentials without looking at the keys. The muscle memory of someone who'd typed those same credentials hundreds of times in very different contexts. The screen illuminated with a map of current threat assessments across 3 theaters. She began. Current human intent indicates increased insurgent activity in... Hold on. Chamberlain raised his hand. Explain human intent for those of us who don't speak contractor. The room knew he was performing now. Every officer present understood that human intent meant human intelligence. But watching the civilian squirm was apparently more valuable than the briefing itself. Human intelligence, sir, as opposed to SIGINT or IMINT. And you learned these terms from? My work, sir. Your work reading reports actual soldiers risked their lives to gather? Chamberlain leaned back in his chair. Must be nice, safe, comfortable. Jade's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she said nothing, simply continued the brief, her voice never wavering even as the disrespect thickened the air. Lieutenant Pruitt whispered to Hayes, loud enough for effect. This is what happens when we lower standards. Kowalski felt her. Stomach turn. This wasn't right. This wasn't what she'd imagined military service would be. But she was a junior enlisted soldier in a room full of officers. What could she possibly say? The briefing continued for another 10 minutes. Jade presented complex intelligence with clarity that should have impressed them, should have made them wonder where a simple contractor learned to synthesize classified information from multiple sources into actionable intelligence. Should have, but didn't, because they'd already decided who she was the moment they saw the contractor badge. Captain Hayes stood as Jade finished her presentation, blocking her path to the door. His green eyes carried the particular cruelty of men who need audiences for their confidence. Quick question before you go, desk jockey. Bet you can't even identify an M4 from an M16. Jade gathered her folders without looking at him. The M4 carbine features a 14.5-inch barrel with collapsible stock. The M16A4 maintains a 20-inch barrel with fixed stock. Different effective ranges, different applications. The answer came too quickly, too precisely. Hayes blinked, momentarily thrown. Lieutenant Pruitt stepped in, her voice carrying manufactured patience. No offense, but civilians shouldn't handle classified intel without adult supervision. You might misinterpret tactical nuances you've never actually experienced. A new voice joined, Captain Lewis, 35. Infantry officer with enough ribbons to suggest deployment experience, but not enough to suggest humility. She probably reads Wikipedia before these griefs, memorizes the terminology. Jade moved toward the exit. Someone had left a coffee mug balanced on the edge of the table, directly in her path. Whether accident or intention didn't matter. As she passed, the mug tipped. Her hand shot out before conscious thought could intervene. Fingers closed around ceramic 6 inches from impact. The movement was economical, reflexive, precise. She hadn't looked, hadn't tracked the falling. The object visually. Her hand simply knew where to be. The room went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Hayes recovered first. Lucky catch. But CSM Morrison was leaning forward now, his weathered face intent. That wasn't luck. That was muscle memory, trained through thousands of repetitions. The kind of reflexes drilled into soldiers who might need to catch a live grenade or snatch equipment mid-fall during tactical operations. Jade set the mug down carefully, said nothing, returned to gathering her materials. Major Chamberlain stood, his chair scraping against linoleum with deliberate loudness. As he walked past Jade's position, his boot connected with her bag beneath the table. Accidental, he would later claim. The bag skidded 4 feet, contents spilling across the floor. Energy bars. Military-issue lens-ed compass with tritium markers. A prescription bottle that rolled face up. Prazosin, 5 milligram. The medication prescribed for combat-related nightmares, for PTSD that wouldn't release its grip at 0300 hours when the screaming started. Lieutenant Pruitt's voice dripped false concern. "Little old for snacks, aren't we?" Jade knelt, collecting items with mechanical efficiency. Her movements remained controlled, deliberate. Only someone watching closely would notice the slight tremor in her left hand when it closed around the prescription bottle. Only someone like Morrison, who'd seen enough combat veterans to recognize the signs. She returned everything to her bag, stood, waited for dismissal that Chamberlain seemed determined not to provide. "Before you leave," the major said, "I'm curious about something in your brief. You referenced Ranger Handbook Section 514 regarding ambush protocols. How exactly would a contractor know that material?" The question landed like artillery. Section 514 wasn't publicly available. The protocols for immediate action drills during near and far ambushes were classified training material, restricted to Ranger-qualified personnel and specific infantry units. Jade's face remained neutral. "I read the unclassified version, sir." "There is no unclassified version of Section 514. Chamberlain crossed his arms. "So either you're making things up or you've accessed material above your clearance level." Morrison's eyes narrowed. The girl was caught now, forced to either admit error or reveal something she clearly wanted hidden. But her response came steady, unrehearsed. "I misspoke, sir. I meant FM 3-21.8, the Infantry Rifle Platoon Field Manual. The principles are similar." Technically true, but the way she'd initially phrased it, the casual reference to specific Ranger Handbook sections, suggested hands-on familiarity, the kind gained through practical application, not reading. Specialist Kowalski shifted in her seat, discomfort building. This felt wrong. The way predators circled wounded prey felt wrong. Jade moved toward the door again. On the projection screen behind her, a surveillance photo remained from her brief. Taliban fighters positioned around a technical vehicle, weapons visible. She'd moved past that slide quickly during the presentation, but Hayes pulled it back up now. "Hold on, educate me since you're the expert." He pointed at the lead fighter's rifle. "What weapon is that?" "Standard AK-47, anyone would assume." The weapon appeared in every intelligence brief, every news report from the region. Hayes was setting up an easy question designed to make her look foolish if she complicated it. Jade glanced at the screen. Her answer came without hesitation. "Kalashnikov AK-103, not AK-47. Note the polymer magazine and side-folding stock. Also, the gas block is slightly different. Barrel length is 16 inches versus the original pattern. Chambered in 7.62 by 39, effective range approximately 400 meters. The specificity landed like incoming fire. That wasn't book knowledge. That was field identification, the kind of instant weapon recognition drilled into soldiers who needed to assess threats in split seconds during close combat. Combat. Hayes tried to recover. Anyone can memorize Wikipedia articles. But Morrison was standing now, his posture rigid. 28 years of experience was screaming warnings his rank didn't give him authority to voice. Not yet. Not with a major running this circus. A sergeant first class in the back row, a weapons instructor Morrison knew personally, leaned in. "CSM, that's not memorization, that's operator-level knowledge. The AK-103 isn't even common in theater. How does she know the gas block differences?" Morrison said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Chamberlain sensed he was losing control of the room's narrative. Some officers were looking at Jade differently now, questions forming behind professional expressions. He needed to reassert dominance. "Tell you what, desk jockey." The major's voice carried forced joviality. If you're so knowledgeable about weapons and tactics, let's move this to the armory training room. Give you a chance to demonstrate this expertise. Jade met his eyes. For the first time, something flickered across her face. Not fear, recognition. The look of someone who'd made a calculation and accepted the outcome. If that's what you'd like, sir. The crowd followed. What started as 47 personnel swelled to over 50 as word spread through adjacent offices. Phones remained out, recording everything. This was better than planned training. This was entertainment. Before we see what happens next, quick question. Have you ever been in a room where everyone underestimated you? Where your real experience was invisible behind assumptions they refused to question? What happened when you finally showed them the truth? Hold that thought. The armory training room smelled of gun oil and male certainty. Fluorescent lights reflected off polished concrete floors. Weapon racks lined the walls, each rifle secured with military precision. Major Chamberlain walked to the center of the room with the swagger of a man who'd never questioned his own authority. 53 personnel crowded. The doorway and observation windows. Phones angled for clear shots. This was going viral regardless of outcome. Chamberlain selected an M4A1 carbine from the rack, not the standard configuration. This one carried SOPMOD Block 2 modifications, Daniel Defense RIS-2 rail system, Trajecan ACOG optic, PEQ-15 laser module, suppressor attachment points. The kind of weapon configuration most officers only saw in PowerPoint presentations about special operations. "Simple test," Chamberlain announced. "Field strip and reassemble this weapon, blindfolded." He produced a black cloth from his pocket, clearly premeditated. "You've got 60 seconds. Captain Hayes grinned. "This isn't the basic rifle from Google Images, desk jockey. This is what actual trigger pullers use downrange." Jade stood motionless for 3 seconds. Her hazel eyes tracked the weapon with unsettling focus, reading modifications the way scholars read text. Then she removed her cardigan. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Underneath, a fitted long-sleeve shirt revealed what the oversized cardigan had concealed: defined shoulders, athletic build, with visible muscle structure in her forearms. The physique of someone who'd spent years carrying 70-pound rucks through mountain terrain, not pushing papers across desks. CSM Morrison's voice was barely audible. "Those are shooter's arms." Jade approached the weapon. Her inspection was methodical, professional. Press check to verify empty chamber. Magazine release, inspect feed lips. Charging handle manipulation, listening to the sound of the bolt carrier group cycling. Her fingers traced the rail system, identifying attachment points without looking, muscle memory cataloging information faster than conscious thought. She noticed things. The suppressor had been recently mounted, evidenced by fresh carbon scoring on the threads. The ACOG was zeroed for 556 NATO. Elevation knob turned exactly 12 clicks from baseline. Someone had fired this weapon within the last 48 hours. "Lieutenant?" Lieutenant Pruitt whispered to the officer beside her. She's stalling, trying to look competent. Jade finished her inspection. Nodded once. "Ready, sir." Captain Hayes stepped forward with the blindfold, tying it deliberately tight, checking twice to ensure no light penetration. Jade's breathing remained steady, slow, the kind of controlled respiration taught in high-stress tactical training. "Timer starts on first movement," Chamberlain announced. Someone produced a stopwatch. The room held collective breath. Jade's hands moved to the weapon. What happened next would be analyzed frame by frame in the recordings. Her fingers found the charging handle without hesitation, pulled it to the rear, locked the bolt. Pushed takedown pins with practiced pressure, exact amount of force needed. Upper and lower receivers separated. Bolt carrier group extraction was smooth, efficient, the motion of someone who'd performed this action thousands of times in complete darkness, because tactical situations don't always provide light. Firing pin retaining pin removal, bolt cam pin rotation, Components laid in precise order on the table, each placement deliberate. Someone trained properly never has to search for parts during reassembly, even blind. 23 seconds. Disassembly complete. The room was silent except for breathing and the soft tap of phone cameras refocusing. Reassembly began. Her hands never fumbled, never searched. Firing pin insertion, cam pin rotation, bolt into carrier. The mechanical symphony of properly maintained equipment finding its correct configuration. Charging handle seated, upper and lower receivers mated, takedown pins secured. Final functions check performed entirely by touch, listening to mechanical sounds that confirmed proper assembly. 19 seconds. Reassembly complete. Total time, 42 seconds. She removed the blindfold, picked up the weapon. Press check. Trigger squeeze, listening for correct trigger reset. Safety selector manipulation through all positions. Then she did something. Something that made Morrison's breath catch. She performed immediate action drill, slapped the magazine well though no magazine was present, racked the charging handle with proper aggression, tapped the forward assist, and resumed shooting stance with the kind of automatic precision that only comes from emergency malfunction clearing under live fire. Nobody had asked her to do that. It simply happened, muscle memory betraying training she wasn't supposed to have. 42 seconds. The timekeeper's voice cracked slightly. The Ranger School standard is 45 seconds. SEAL standard is 50. Chamberlain's face had lost color. That proves nothing. She obviously practiced with that specific rifle model. But CSM Morrison was standing now, his expression carved from stone. Sir, that weapon configuration isn't standard issue. She couldn't have practiced with that exact setup unless she'd been deployed with a unit authorized SOP Mod Block 2. Hayes tried to recover the narrative. Parlor trick. Anyone can memorize one skill. Let's see her actually shoot. That'll expose the fraud. Chamberlain grabbed the opportunity like a drowning man reaching for debris. Range, now. We'll see if your YouTube tutorials taught you marksmanship. The crowd shifted, following them out of the armory toward the indoor range complex. Specialist Kowalski walked beside a staff sergeant she didn't know, her voice hesitant. This doesn't feel right. What if she actually knows what she's doing? The staff sergeant shook his head. Then she should have said something from the start, should have worn the uniform if she earned it. But Kowalski wasn't sure that logic tracked. Maybe there were reasons to hide. Maybe silence was survival, not deception. The rangemaster, a sergeant first class named Williams with 22 years of experience, was cleaning brass from lane 3 when the crowd arrived. He straightened, sensing command presence. "Major, what can I do for you?" "Need to qualify a contractor. Standard course." Williams. Miss glanced at Jade, then at the phones recording everything. His expression suggested he'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. "Lane 5 is clear. What qualification level?" Chamberlain smiled without warmth. "Expert. Might as well set the standard high." Rangemaster Williams handed Jade the M4 with standard iron sights, no optics. 10 rounds loaded, chamber empty. 25-meter lane, paper targets showing standard silhouettes. The easiest test in the progression, the one designed to establish baseline competence before moving to harder challenges. "Whenever you're ready, ma'am," Williams said, his tone professionally neutral. Jade assumed shooting stance, feet shoulder-width apart, weight slightly forward, knees barely bent. The stance was textbook, but something in the way she settled into it suggested it was more home than learned position. She charged the weapon with her support hand, keeping the rifle pointed downrange, finger indexed along the frame until ready to fire. No wasted movement, no unnecessary adjustments, just ready. She fired 10 rounds in 8 seconds. The mechanical pop of controlled pairs echoed through the range. Brass ejected in consistent pattern, landing in a tight grouping that spoke to unchanging stance and recoil management. Her breathing never altered. Each trigger press was distinct, deliberate, the rhythm of someone who'd fired tens of thousands of rounds until the weapon became extension rather than tool. Williams activated the target retrieval system. The paper silhouette traveled back on motorized cables. He unclipped it, his weathered face carefully blank as he examined the results. All 10 rounds within a 2-inch circle, center mass. The kind of grouping that suggested either exceptional luck or exceptional skill. And luck doesn't produce consistent mechanics. Captain Hayes grabbed the target before Williams could announce results. Beginner's luck. Anyone can hit stationary paper at 25 meters. But his voice carried less certainty now. The crowd, Weed had grown to nearly 70 personnel, including officers from adjacent buildings who'd heard something worth witnessing was happening. Phones multiplied. This was spreading through base social media in real time. Major Chamberlain's jaw worked silently. He'd expected failure, humiliation, confirmation of his assumptions. Instead, he was getting precision that made his own expert qualification scores look mediocre. The situation required escalation. Williams, set up moving targets, 50 meters, pop-up course. The rangemaster hesitated. Sir, that's the standard qualification course. 40 targets, mix of friend and foe silhouettes, takes most shooters 15 to 20 minutes. I'm aware of the standard, Sergeant First Class. Set it up. Williams programmed the course. 40 pneumatic target lifters scattered across 50 meters of range space. Random presentation timing. Targets would appear for 3 to 7 seconds before dropping. Shoot the enemy silhouettes, avoid the civilian patterns. Standard qualification required 23 hits minimum. Expert level demanded 36 or better. Lieutenant Pruitt leaned toward Hayes. She'll choke now. Moving targets require instinct you can't learn from books. Jade accepted a fresh magazine, 40 rounds. She seated it with decisive upward pressure, immediate tap to confirm, charging handle manipulation smooth as hydraulics. Chamber loaded, weapon hot. Safety on until course start. Ready position, Williams commanded. Jade assumed low ready, rifle at 45-degree angle, eyes downrange, scanning the target field. Her breathing slowed further. 4 counts in, hold 2, 6 counts out. Combat breathing, the kind taught to prevent adrenaline dump from destroying fine motor skills under stress. CSM Morrison moved closer to the observation window. Something in her stance was triggering recognition. The way her weight distributed, the micro-adjustments in her grip. He'd seen this before, in Ranger battalions, in soldiers who'd spent years in close quarters. Quarters, battle environments where target identification happened in fractions of seconds because hesitation got people killed. Course start, Williams announced. First target popped at 11 o'clock. Enemy silhouette. Jade's rifle snapped up, sight picture acquired, round fired before most observers registered the target appeared. Hit, center mass. Target dropped. 0.8 seconds. 2 more targets. Civilian pattern at 2 o'clock, enemy at 9. Her rifle tracked left, ignoring the civilian, engaging the threat. Another center mass hit. 0.7 seconds. The course accelerated. Multiple targets presenting simultaneously. This was the stress portion, designed to create decision paralysis. Shoot the wrong target and you failed regardless of accuracy. Hesitate and targets dropped before engagement. Jade moved like water. Smooth transitions between targets, no wasted motion, each shot deliberate. Her situational awareness was total. She tracked presented targets, identified friend versus foe through instant pattern recognition, engaged threats with mechanical precision. 32 seconds into the course, a target malfunctioned. Enemy silhouette presented but stuck halfway up, creating unusual profile. Most shooters would hesitate, confused by the irregular presentation. Jade adjusted her aim point and fired. Hit. The target mechanics freed and it dropped properly. Williams watched his control panel. She compensated for mechanical failure without breaking rhythm. That's adaptive shooting. At 47 seconds, 3 targets presented simultaneously. Long distance, medium, close. Standard doctrine was to engage close threats first, work outward. Jade engaged the distant target first, then medium, then close. Hayes started to comment on the protocol violation, but Morrison cut him off. She's right. Long target was turned, presenting weapon toward her position. Medium was static. Close was civilian. She prioritized actual threat, not proximity. 3 more hits. Perfect assessment. The course concluded at 1 minute 18 seconds. Williams stopped the timer, checked his electronic scoring panel. His expression remained professionally neutral, but his eyes widened slightly. 40 hits out of 40 presentations, 0 civilian casualties. Average engagement time 0.8 seconds per target. The range fell silent. That wasn't expert qualification. That was beyond expert. That was competition-level shooting. That was the kind of score posted by soldiers whose entire job description involved putting rounds on target under the worst possible conditions. Chamberlain's voice was tight. "System malfunction. Run it again." Williams turned slowly. "Sir, I calibrated this morning. The system is functioning within specifications." "Then she got lucky, random chance." "Sir, with respect, 40 perfect hits isn't random chance. That's statistical impossibility." Lieutenant Pruitt tried a different angle. Maybe the course was set too easy, targets were up too long. Williams pulled up the computer log, rotated the screen so everyone could see. "Standard timing. Same course I run for Ranger candidates. Her performance exceeds the average Ranger qual score by 18%. Hold on, stop scrolling. What you're about to witness is the moment an entire base realizes they've made a catastrophic error in judgment. If you've ever wanted to see assumptions shatter in real time, you need to see the next 3 minutes. This is where everything changes. Major Chamberlain stared at the scoring display like it had personally betrayed him. Around him, 70-plus personnel processed what they'd witnessed with varying degrees of discomfort. The phones kept recording. The evidence kept mounting. And the questions nobody had asked at the start were finally forcing themselves into the light. "One more test," Chamberlain said, his voice stripped of its earlier confidence. "Low-light stress shoot. Multiple targets, shoot, no-shoot discrimination. 30 seconds. Rangemaster Williams looked at the Major. "Major, with open concern now. Sir, that's a specialized course. We use it for close protection teams and—" "Set it up, Sergeant First Class. That's not a request." Williams moved to the control panel, his jaw tight. He'd been running this range for 6 years. He knew what he was watching. The Major was drowning and dragging everyone down with him rather than admitting he'd misjudged the situation catastrophically. The range lights dimmed. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow that mimicked dawn or dusk conditions. Target presentations would be faster, harder to identify. Civilian and enemy silhouettes mixed at random distances. Real-world chaos compressed into controlled environment. Jade checked her weapon. Magazine seated, round-chambered, safety on. Her breathing remained controlled, but something had shifted in her posture. The careful concealment was eroding. Each test stripped away another layer of the person she'd been trying to be, exposing the operator she'd been trained to become. CSM Morrison moved beside Williams at the control station. "What's her body language telling you?" Williams studied Jade through the observation window. "She's not nervous, she's settling. Like this environment is more comfortable than the briefing room." "Because it is," Morrison said quietly. "Combat makes sense, politics don't." The course activated. First target popped at 7 meters. Civilian holding cell phone. Jade's rifle came up, finger on frame, safety still engaged. No shot. Target dropped. Second target. Enemy with rifle at 12 meters. Safety off, sight picture, shot. Center mass hit. 0.9 seconds. The pace accelerated. Targets presenting in rapid sequence. Distances varying from 5 to 25 meters. The course was designed to create overwhelming stimulus, force mistakes through sensory overload. Jade moved through it like choreographed dance. Her muzzle discipline was perfect, never flagging safe directions even during transitions. Her target identification was instant. Instant, reading body language and hand positions faster than conscious thought could process. Weapon in hands meant threat, empty hands meant hold fire. The calculus was simple when you'd made these decisions hundreds of times while lives actually hung in the balance. 15 seconds in, the course threw its designed curveball. Two targets presented simultaneously at different distances. One enemy at 20 meters, one civilian at 8 meters, positioned directly in front of the enemy, creating a hostage scenario. Standard training said don't take the shot. Risk of hitting the civilian was too high. Wait for better angle or different solution. Jade adjusted her stance 30 degrees, creating an angle where the civilian silhouette no longer overlapped the threat. Fired one round. The enemy target took a hit in the exposed shoulder area, the only portion visible from her adjusted position. Williams actually stepped back from his control panel. That's hostage rescue protocol. That's not taught in basic marksmanship. The course concluded. 19 seconds elapsed. Jade saved her weapon, ejected the magazine, locked the bolt to the rear. Proper clearing procedure performed without prompting. Williams checked his display. All enemy targets neutralized, 0 civilian casualties. Shot placement averaged within 3-inch groups across varying distances and lighting conditions. He paused. "Sir, this isn't amateur performance. This is professional-level tactical shooting." Captain Hayes had gone pale. Lieutenant Pruitt was staring at her boots. The crowd had stopped making jokes. Phones were still recording, but the energy had shifted from entertainment to documentation of something none of them fully understood yet. Chamberlain opened his mouth, searching for another challenge, another test that would prove his initial assessment correct. But CSM Morrison's voice cut through. "Major, permission to speak." "Denied, Sergeant Major." "Sir, with respect, I think we need to verify this contractor's background before proceeding further." I said denied. She's probably taken advanced civilian courses, tactical fantasy camps for people who want to play soldier. Morrison's face hardened. "Sir, tactical fantasy camps don't teach immediate action drills or hostage rescue protocols. Those are restricted training programs." Before Chamberlain could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, irritation flashing across his face, then froze. The caller ID showed a number he recognized. Brigade Headquarters. Not his direct chain of command calling for routine matters. This was the number that appeared when senior leadership needed immediate answers. He stepped away from the group, phone pressed to his ear. The conversation was brief, his responses clipped. "Yes, sir. Understood, sir. Right away, sir." When he returned, his expression had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something between confusion and fear. "Everyone, except essential personnel, clear this range." His voice carried an edge nobody had heard before. "Specialist Kowalski, you stay. CSM Morrison, you stay. Captain Hayes, Lieutenant Pruitt, you're dismissed." Hayes started to protest. "Sir, I think we should." "I think you should follow orders, Captain. Leave, now." The crowd dispersed with reluctant shuffling. Phones were pocketed, though the damage was already spreading through encrypted message apps and social media. This story was viral before any official narrative could contain it. Williams secured the range, then stood by the control panel, uncertain whether he counted as essential personnel. Morrison gave him a subtle nod. "Stay." Jade remained at the firing line, weapon cleared and safe, her expression unreadable. But her hands had developed a slight tremor, the kind that came when adrenaline finally caught up to action, when the body realized it had been operating in crisis mode and sent delayed chemical invoice. Chamberlain faced her, his authority visibly cracking. "I just received a call from Colonel Brennan's office. He's en route to or this location. Wants a full briefing on what's happening in his range facility." He paused, seeming to force the next words out. "He specifically asked about you by name." Morrison's eyebrows rose. The brigade commander knew this contractor by name. That wasn't standard. That suggested history, context, information the major was only now realizing he should have requested before starting this circus. "Miss Mercer," Chamberlain continued, his tone shifting towards something approximating professionalism, "before the colonel arrives, I'm giving you an opportunity to explain who you are and why you possess capabilities inconsistent with contractor credentials." Jade met his eyes. For 5 long seconds, she said nothing. Then, quietly, "Sir, I'm not authorized to discuss my employment history without proper clearance verification. That sounds like evasion. That sounds like proper operational security, sir." The range door opened. Colonel James Brennan entered with the purposeful stride of a man who'd received concerning information and needed immediate clarity. 47 years old, 5'10", salt and pepper hair marking years of service that included Special Forces background before command positions. His gray eyes swept the range, cataloging the people present and their body language with practiced assessment. Major Chamberlain, status report. Chamberlain straightened, his parade ground posture suddenly looking like the costume it had always been. "Sir, we were conducting verification of contractor capabilities following questionable claims during the intelligence briefing. The contractor demonstrated advanced marksmanship and tactical knowledge inconsistent with her documented position." Colonel Brennan's expression remained neutral, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Questionable claims. Explain." She referenced classified material, Ranger Handbook protocols, weapon systems knowledge beyond her clearance level. "I felt it necessary to validate her credentials through practical demonstration." "You felt it necessary." Brennan's voice was dangerously quiet. "And these demonstrations occurred in front of how many witnesses?" "Approximately 70 personnel at peak, sir." 70. Brennan closed his eyes briefly. "With phones recording, I assume." Chamberlain said nothing. Confirmation through silence. Brennan turned to Jade, who stood at a position of attention that was becoming harder to disguise as civilian posture. "Miss Mercer, are you injured or in need of assistance?" "No, sir." "Did you request these tests, or were they demanded of you?" "They were demanded, sir." Brennan pulled his phone from his pocket, scrolled through messages with practiced efficiency. "I received 3 separate reports in the last 20 minutes. Video footage is already circulating through unofficial channels. A contractor performing at special operations capability levels?" He looked up at Chamberlain. "Did you at any point consider there might be legitimate reasons for such capabilities? Reasons that didn't involve fraud or deception?" "Sir, her credentials show civilian contractor, GS-12 intelligence analyst. There was no indication of—" "Because you didn't ask." Brennan's voice cut like shrapnel. "You made assumptions and turned those assumptions into public spectacle." He moved to the range control panel where Williams still stood. "Sergeant First Class, pull up her qualification scores." Williams complied, the display showing the numerical breakdown of Jade's performance. Brennan studied the data with the eye of someone who understood what the numbers actually meant, who'd seen enough qualification scores to recognize when something was exceptional versus merely competent. 40 out of 40 on pop-up targets. Perfect shoot-no-shoot discrimination under stress conditions. Field strip time of 42 seconds blindfolded on an SOP mod configuration most officers have never touched. He turned back to Chamberlain. "And at no point did warning bells sound in your head?" CSM Morrison stepped forward. "Sir?" "Permission to speak." "Granted, Sergeant Major." "I attempted to suggest background verification earlier. The Major declined to pursue that course of action." Brennan nodded slowly, adding that information to his growing assessment. He pulled a second phone from his pocket, this one with encrypted display and biometric lock. Military-issue secure device for classified communications. He dialed a number from memory, waited through 2 rings. "This is Colonel Brennan, Fort Liberty. I need immediate verification on a personnel matter." He paused, listening. "Authorization code Victor 729er Delta Hotel." Another pause. "Name Jade Mercer. Social Security ending in 4713. The silence stretched. Brennan's expression shifted through several micro-expressions, too quick to read individually, but collectively suggesting he was receiving information that confirmed suspicions and created new problems simultaneously. "Understood. Thank you." He ended the call. The range felt smaller suddenly. air pressure changing like before a storm. Specialist Kowalski stood against the wall, forgotten by the senior personnel, but watching everything with wide eyes that suggested she understood she was witnessing something significant, something that would be discussed in hushed tones for years. Brennan looked at Jade for a long moment. Then, deliberately, he came to attention and rendered a textbook salute. Captain Mercer. The two words detonated in the confined space like flashbangs. Chamberlain actually stepped backward. Morrison's face showed no surprise, only confirmation. Williams stopped breathing for 3 seconds. Jade returned the salute with precision that erased any remaining doubt about her military background. Her bearing transformed completely, civilian concealment abandoned. She was standing the way she'd been trained to stand for 12 years before trauma and loss had driven her into hiding. "At ease," Brennan said, then turned to address everyone present. For those requiring clarification. Captain Jade Mercer, United States Army. Retired. Previous assignment was with the 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion. Chamberlain found his voice. "Sir, Rangers are male only. Women aren't assigned to—" "Women aren't assigned to the regiment in combat roles," Brennan corrected. "That's accurate. Captain Mercer was one of the first female graduates of Ranger School, earned her tab in 2012 at age 20. She subsequently served in enabler roles attached to Ranger battalions during deployment rotations." Morrison's eyes narrowed. Enabler roles was military speak for specialists attached to combat units, intelligence personnel, combat camera, certain other positions that couldn't be discussed in uncleared spaces. Brennan continued, reading from notes on his secure phone. 4 deployments. Afghanistan 3 times, Iraq once. Dates are classified. Specific missions are classified. Awards include 4 Bronze Stars, 2 with Valor Device, Purple Heart, Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device, Combat Infantryman Badge. Each award landed like incoming rounds. Bronze Star with Valor meant direct combat engagement, heroism under fire. CIB was only awarded to infantry soldiers who'd engaged enemy forces. The awards list painted a picture of someone who hadn't merely deployed but had actively participated in close-quarters combat operations. March 2018. Brennan's voice dropped lower. Wardak Province. IED strike during night operation. Captain Mercer was team leader. The blast killed 4 Rangers immediately. She sustained shrapnel wounds to her left shoulder and back, traumatic brain injury, second-degree burns across 30% of her body. Jade's expression remained controlled, but her left hand had curled into a fist tight enough that her knuckles went white. The tremor increased. Despite her injuries, Captain Mercer pulled 2 wounded soldiers from the burning vehicle while under small arms fire from enemy fighters. She maintained security and provided medical treatment until QRF arrived. Brennan looked up from his phone. She was medically retired in 2019 following 14 months of treatment and rehabilitation. The silence was absolute. Even the range ventilation system seemed to have stopped. Brennan turned to Jade. "Captain, you're under no obligation to answer, but I need to ask for the record. Why did you accept a contractor position under circumstances where your background would be concealed?" Jade's voice was steady but quiet. "Sir, every time I put on the uniform, I see their faces. Sergeant Williams, Specialist Torres, Private First Class Anderson, Corporal McKay, my Rangers, the ones I couldn't save." Her hand moved unconsciously to her left shoulder, where shrapnel scars hid under the long-sleeve shirt. "The contractor position allowed me to continue serving without constant reminders. I could analyze intelligence, contribute to mission success without drowning in survivor's guilt every time I saw a Ranger tab." "Why not disclose your background when the disrespect started?" "Because I was trying to be someone else, sir. Someone who wasn't defined by the worst day of her life. And maybe," she paused, "maybe I thought if I could succeed without the tab, without the rank, it would prove I had value beyond those 4 names tattooed on my arm." Colonel Brennan dismissed Jade and the remaining personnel except Chamberlain. The conversation that followed behind closed doors lasted 37 minutes. When Chamberlain emerged, his face carried the particular pallor of an officer who just watched his career end in real time. By 1400 hours, official memorandums began circulating through encrypted channels. Major Derek Chamberlain received a General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand, a permanent mark that would prevent any future promotion or command position. He was reassigned to logistics coordination at division level, a desk job with no personnel oversight, no authority, no path forward. Mandatory equal opportunity training was scheduled. His West Point ring suddenly felt like Captain Hayes rather than achievement. Captain Hayes received written reprimand in his permanent file, suspended from officer professional development activities for 6 months, and was required to complete a Respect in Workplace course typically reserved for junior enlisted soldiers facing their first disciplinary action. His fitness report would reflect failure of judgment and leadership during the incident. Lieutenant Pruitt's punishment was more nuanced. Formal counseling session with the brigade's senior female officer, a tough-as-nails lieutenant colonel who deployed 6 times and had exactly 0 patience for women who sabotaged other women. Pruitt also received mandatory mentorship assignment and was required to write a 5,000-word essay on internalized misogyny in military culture, with sources cited and regular progress updates. At 1600 hours, Chamberlain requested a meeting with Jade. She agreed to meet at the base library, neutral territory where neither rank nor history held particular advantage. He arrived first, sitting at a corner table away from other patrons. When Jade entered in civilian clothes, contractor lanyard still visible, he stood reflexively, military courtesy overriding personal circumstance. "Captain Mercer, thank you for agreeing to meet." She sat across from him, her hazel eyes tired in a way that suggested sleep had been difficult the night before. "You have something to say, Major." "There's no excuse for my behavior." The words came stiff, rehearsed, but carrying genuine weight beneath the formality. "I was intimidated by your competence because it highlighted my own inadequacy. I've spent 18 years in uniform and never heard a shot fired in anger. You represent everything I pretend to be but never earned." Jade listened without interrupting. "I took my insecurity and weaponized it against you, made you the target for my own failures." Chamberlain's hands were clasped on the table, knuckles white. "My career is over. I know that. I just need you to—" "I know that I understand why. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just acknowledging the damage I caused." Jade was quiet for 10 seconds. When she spoke, her voice carried weight that made Chamberlain flinch. "What bothers me most wasn't the disrespect toward me. I've faced worse. What bothers me is how easily everyone followed you. That crowd mentality where 70 people watched something wrong happen and only 2 tried to stop it. I know. You created an environment where cruelty was acceptable, where mocking someone for perceived weakness was entertainment." She leaned forward slightly. "That mentality gets soldiers killed downrange. When respect is conditional, when people only have value if they prove themselves according to arbitrary standards, units fragment. Cohesion fails, and that's when the enemy finds openings." Chamberlain nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "I accept your apology," Jade continued, "but understand that 4 Rangers can't accept it. Sergeant Williams, Specialist Torres, Private First Class Anderson, Corporal McKay. They died under my leadership, and I carry that every single day. Think about that weight before you judge someone's worth based on their appearance or job title." She stood to leave. Chamberlain remained seated, diminished in ways that had nothing to do with rank. At 1800 hours, Captain Hayes found Jade at the base fitness center. She was running on a treadmill, pace steady at 7-minute miles, sweat soaking through her shirt. He waited until she finished her set, approached as she toweled off. "Ma'am, could I speak with you?" Jade studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the stretching area. They moved away from other soldiers working out. Hayes struggled to find words. "I was a coward. I joined the mockery because I was afraid of being targeted myself. I followed Chamberlain's lead because it was easier than standing up for what was right." Then you don't understand what the uniform means, Jade said quietly. Rangers don't leave each other too. To wolves. We don't stand by while someone gets torn apart just because speaking up is uncomfortable. I want to be better. Will you tell me how? Jade considered the question. Stop measuring your worth by who you can look down on. Stop seeking validation through comparison. Measure yourself by who you lift up, who you defend when they can't defend themselves. She paused. You deployed once, rear echelon position. Nothing wrong with that. Not everyone sees combat. But don't compensate for perceived inadequacy by diminishing others. Hayes nodded slowly. I'll try. I know that's not enough, but I'll try. Trying is where it starts. Consistency is where it matters. The hardest conversation came 2 days later when Jade initiated contact with Lieutenant Pruitt. She found the lieutenant in her office after duty hours, staring at a blank computer screen with red-rimmed eyes. Jade knocked on the open door. Got a minute? Pruitt looked up, surprise and shame crossing her face. Ma'am, I don't deserve your time. Maybe not, but I'm giving it anyway. Jade entered, closed the door, sat in the chair facing Pruitt's desk. You want to tell me why you did it? Pruitt's composure cracked. Because I believed the lie, that there's only room for one woman at the top, that every other woman is competition, that tearing you down somehow elevated me. Tears started, genuine and uncontrolled. I became everything I hate about this system. You believed what the system taught you, Jade said. That's not excuse, but it's explanation. This culture tells women they have to choose between being respected and being feminine, that showing strength means showing no vulnerability, that there are so few slots for women that we have to fight each other for them. How do I fix this? You start by recognizing that other women aren't your enemies. We're your allies in a system that wasn't designed for us. Jade leaned forward. Next woman who comes through your office, especially junior enlisted soldiers looking for guidance, you be the senior officer I needed. You defend her. You mentor her. You create the environment you wish someone had created for you. Pruitt nodded, wiping her eyes. I don't know if I can be that person. Neither did I. But we become that person by choosing to, repeatedly, until it stops being a choice and starts being who we are. At 0900 the following morning, Colonel Brennan assembled 200 personnel in formation. Word had spread through official and unofficial channels. Everyone knew something significant was happening. Colonel Brennan stood before the formation with the bearing of someone who delivered both commendations and condemnations enough times to know which left lasting impact. 200 soldiers stood at attention, the morning air carrying tension that suggested everyone understood this wasn't routine ceremony. Yesterday, this installation failed one of its finest warriors, Brennan began, his voice carrying across the formation without amplification. We allowed assumptions to override inquiry. We permitted mockery to substitute for leadership. We failed to uphold the standards we claim to represent. He gestured toward Jade, who stood to his right in civilian clothes, contractor lanyard visible. Captain Jade Mercer served this nation for 12 years, earned her Ranger tab when most of us couldn't imagine the physical and mental demands required. Deployed 4 times to combat zones where she engaged enemy forces and saved American lives under conditions most of us will never face. The formation remained silent, but the quality of that silence had shifted. This wasn't uncomfortable quiet. This was respectful attention. She took a contractor position not because she couldn't serve in uniform, but because the uniform carried memories too heavy to bear daily. She chose to contribute without constant reminders of the Rangers she lost under her command. That choice deserves respect, not ridicule. Brennan presented a certificate of appreciation for her intelligence work, REC, formal recognition that would enter her permanent record. But more importantly, he made public acknowledgement of her service and sacrifice in front of soldiers who would carry this story forward, who would remember the day they learned about judging warriors by civilian clothes. The formation was dismissed. Soldiers approached Jade individually throughout the day. Some offered quiet thanks. Others simply rendered salutes that spoke volumes beyond words. The culture hadn't transformed overnight, but cracks had appeared in foundations of assumption and prejudice. Specialist Kowalski found Jade in the intelligence office that afternoon. "Ma'am, I submitted a request for option 40 contract. I want to try for the regiment." Jade looked up from her reports. "That's not an easy path." "I know, but you proved it's possible. And I'd rather fail trying than never try at all." Kowalski hesitated. "Would you be willing to mentor me? Help me prepare?" "Yes, but understand that I'm not going to make it easier. I'm going to make it realistic. And realistic is harder than you imagine." "I understand, ma'am." Over the following 3 months, Jade's role evolved. She maintained her contractor position for stability and psychological distance she still needed, but Colonel Brennan offered additional duty as instructor at Ranger Training Assessment Course, the pre-selection program that prepared candidates for Ranger School. Her first class included 40 candidates. 8 were women. All of them had heard the story by then, distorted and amplified through the military rumor network until Jade had become almost mythical. She needed to establish reality immediately. "I'm Captain Mercer. I'll be your small unit tactics instructor for this rotation." She stood before them in full uniform, tab visible on her left shoulder, combat infantryman badge above her ribbons. "Some of you are wondering if a woman can teach infantry skills. I'm not here to prove myself. I've already done that in places you haven't been yet. I'm here to prepare. Prepare you to keep your soldiers alive downrange. If you have problems with that, leave now." No one moved. Good, because the enemy doesn't care about your gender, your politics, or your feelings. The enemy cares about finding weakness and exploiting it. My job is to eliminate those weaknesses before you face real bullets. She became known as the hardest instructor in the course, but also the most respected. Her standards were uncompromising because she'd seen what happened when standards slipped. She'd carried the consequences of inadequate preparation in ways that still woke her at 0300 with screaming nightmares. The female candidates particularly gravitated toward her, not because she made it easier, but because she represented proof that competence could overcome prejudice, that the tab was earned through performance, not gender. Male candidates learned different lessons, that competence had no gender, that their sisters in arms could carry weight, return fire, and lead soldiers just as effectively as brothers, that the uniform mattered more than the body wearing it. Base culture began shifting in small ways. Contractor personnel received quarterly recognition ceremonies. Mandatory training on unconscious bias became standard. Zero-tolerance policies for stolen valor accusations without evidence were formalized. None of it was perfect. None of it erased the damage. But direction mattered more than speed. At 0300 on a Tuesday in her 4th month as instructor, Jade woke from the nightmare. The same nightmare. The explosion. The flames. 4 voices screaming her name, while she pulled burning metal with hands that would carry scars forever. She reached for the prazosin on her nightstand. 5 milligrams of chemical assistance that sometimes helped, sometimes didn't. Tonight, it didn't. She dressed in running clothes and hit the streets surrounding base housing. 6 miles in darkness, fighting demons that never truly left, only waited for quiet moments to attack. The running helped, not because it solved anything, but because it proved she could still move forward even when the past tried to drag her back. Every mile was a small victory against the weight of survivor's guilt that insisted she should have died with her rangers instead of living to remember them. She returned to her quarters as dawn broke, showered, put on the uniform that still felt like borrowed clothing despite 12 years of earning the right to wear it, checked her schedule, morning briefing at 0645. Same room where this had started, same chairs, different awareness. The briefing room stood at attention when she entered. New major in Chamberlain's former position, an officer who'd actually deployed and understood that respect was earned through competence, not demanded through rank. He took notes during her threat assessment, asked intelligent questions, created an environment where information mattered more than ego. After the briefing, a lieutenant approached, young, maybe 24, fresh from officer basic course. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "How did you stay calm when they were mocking you? I would have snapped." Jade considered the question carefully. "Because I knew who I was. Their opinions couldn't change my service record, couldn't erase the tab I earned or the rangers I served with. External validation wasn't necessary because internal knowledge was sufficient. But you stayed silent. You didn't defend yourself." And that was a mistake. Jade met the lieutenant's eyes. "I thought silence was strength, that rising above meant not engaging. But silence protects the system that allows abuse. Speaking up isn't pride. It's protecting the next person they'll target." The lieutenant nodded slowly, processing. "Don't make my mistake," Jade continued. "Know your worth, but also defend it. Not for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you who deserves better than what I accepted." That afternoon, her phone rang, restricted number, the kind that appeared when certain organizations needed specific capabilities for specific situations. "Mercer? Captain, this is JSOC Operations. We have a developing situation that requires someone with your particular skill set. Are you available for consultation?" Jade looked out her office window at the training fields where her current class was conducting patrol exercises. 40 candidates who needed her knowledge. A contractor position that provided stability. A fragile piece she'd constructed carefully over months of healing. But some calls couldn't be ignored. Some skills were too rare to waste. Some missions required operators who understood that service didn't end when the uniform came off. "I'm listening." They called her desk jockey at morning briefing. They saw civilian clothes and contractor badge and assumed weakness. They never asked about the tab hidden under her sleeve or the names tattooed on her arm. They never considered that warriors aren't defined by what they wear, but by what they've endured. Every person who judges by appearance is one moment away from disrespecting a hero. Remember that before you mock the quiet person in the corner, before you assume that silence means absence of capability, before you decide that credentials tell the complete story. You never know what battles they fought, what losses they carry, what tab they're hiding under their sleeve. Captain Jade Mercer walked out of her office toward whatever came next, carrying the weight of 4 names and the knowledge that service takes infinite forms, some visible, some hidden, all worthy of respect until proven otherwise. The morning sun caught her ranger tab as she moved, black and gold scroll that represented more than qualification. It represented the promise she'd made to 4 soldiers who couldn't come home, to train the next generation better, to speak up when silence would be easier, to honor their memory by being the leader they deserved. One day at a time, one class at a time, one soldier at a time. That's how wars are won, and that's how warriors heal.